Hello, and welcome to Comic Beat Insider. I always mess it up. So, hi, I am Heidi MacDonald. I am the editor-in-chief of The Beat at comiccon.com.
And I am Jimmy Aquino. This is so cheesy. The host, producer, whatever you want to say, of Comic News Insider, the weekly podcast covering comics, TV, film, and pop culture.
You go, John.
And I am John Hoche, just fan of crazy movies like They Live and comic books, and I'm an actor here in New York City.
And also a regular correspondent and reviewer for Comic News Insider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm Ricky, and glad that everyone's still human.
Yes.
I write for The Beat and Graphic Policy, and I have a podcast called Sabla Comics, which is comics for people who speak Spanish.
Nice. Well,
Excelente.
as you may have guessed, today our topic is They Live, the cult film classic from John Carpenter, starring Roddy Piper and Keith David. And, as you know, on this podcast, the Zoomcast, now we're live on YouTube. So whatever this is, our program, we look at classic movies of the past, kind of cult movies, and with an emphasis on ones that either Jimmy or I haven't seen. So that we usually Jimmy, although believe me, there are so many things I haven't seen. It's incredible that they haven't uncovered my weak spots yet.
Oh, I'm gonna start going into classic films.
You need to. Yeah, let's show up, Heidi, for sure. But anyway, today They Live. I've been thinking about this movie a lot for some reason in these days, and I think it's more germane than ever in this world we live in. And in fact, as I'm sure we'll talk about, it's been used on all sides of all arguments, which is the test of a truly powerful statement that it is. Being able to, everybody wants to be on the side of this. So, They Live by John Carpenter.
Well, yeah, I only saw it. I assume you all have seen it before. I know Heidi did. I only saw it for the first time about 4 days ago.
Oh, wow.
So it was my first time I heard about it. I've heard of Carpenter films. I'm woefully behind on a lot of his films. But I liked it. I have a lot of things to say about it, though, and maybe some questions.
Yeah, my first experience with They Live, it's not as memorable as some of the movies in this, but I'm a huge mark for Roddy Piper. He's my favorite wrestler. And so, of course, the movie caught my attention at the time it came out. I think I probably watched it. Here comes the cat. The cat right on target. As soon as I start talking, he shows up. Anyway, I'm sure I watched it on TV. And gloried in its famous fight scene. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Oh yeah.
Dystopian science fiction, and over the years I've watched it here and there many times, and it retains all of its power to not only make mullets and dad jeans safe, but to talk about media manipulation and who is pulling the strings.
Yeah.
I think,
Ricky, go on. No, go on.
Yeah, no, I think the first time I saw it, I didn't even know it was a science fiction movie. I was just told that Roddy Piper was in it. And yes, it could be about wrestling. It could be a Gone with the Wind type story. I didn't care.
that I'd like to see.
But I loved it. And once I figured out what all the media topics and themes and everything that was going on in it, including Roddy Piper's mullet, that made it a classic instantaneously.
Yeah, I think for me, I probably caught it on HBO as a kid and didn't really was in and out and didn't really remember a lot of it. But then in the late 90s, there was this collection of DVDs that came out called Famous Fights. And it was just like,
of course you got it.
Yeah, it was just literally like a DVD montage of not the whole movies, just the fight scenes from different movies. And obviously the one from They Live is an epic, and I think to this day still might be the longest fight on film.
I don't think so. I did a little research, and I think it's still pretty close. But I think the one I found might be just a bit longer. So when we get to the fight, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
I did forget to mention that I saw it for the first time in Spanish in Puerto Rico.
Oh wow!
Oh,
and to this day, I'm pretty sure Piper did the Spanish voiceover because the voice is
Really?
uncanny. Yeah. So that was an interesting.
Can you please do the famous line in Spanish?
Oh man, I think it went. It's been a while, so I
Yeah.
think he comes in and says, "He llegado a mascar chicle y a darles a todos. Y me quedé sin chicle."
Yeah. No chicle, motherfuckers.
They couldn't translate the kicking ass, so they just said, "I'm gonna hit everyone."
That's awesome.
Nice.
I mean, Piper isn't terrible in it. I mean, he's not great, but he's not terrible in it. He's fine. You know, he definitely like has that wrestler acting. It's his first. Was it his first film he did outside of wrestling, or?
Yeah, he had never done anything. Or had the aspirations to really.
So forgivable. You know,
Yeah,
that he's not a great
But
actor.
you know,
Totally fine.
he had actually a very busy career after that, starring in these B and C level films. Probably the best known is Hell Comes to Frogtown.
Hell yeah, I do remember that one.
I
Best
have
known to you guys. Never heard of it.
I have never actually seen Hell Comes to Frogtown. So is it, wow, should I?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely deserve. I mean, if you like Roddy Piper, you got to see it.
Okay, this isn't going to become a Roddy Piper Zoomcast, all right? You can do that on your own, all right? We're not going to cover
well,
that
I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with a Roddy Piper Zoomcast for sure.
Very true.
Not at all. He's awesome.
But I mean, yeah, I think that, you know, the Carpenter talked about he saw Roddy Piper in WrestleMania 3, which was the famous bout against Hulk Hogan, and he saw something in him and met up with him and offered him the role.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I think probably, I mean, he said that what he wanted was that Roddy had this everyman quality to him. And, you know, the story is about Nada, a kind of a drifter in Los Angeles. This is set in, the film was released in 1988. A lot of people don't remember that there was a really bad recession in the United States in 1987 under Ronald Reagan, because, you know, Republican presidents are probably just flawless with the economy. They never have anything go wrong on their watch. But there was a huge Reagan recession, completely forgotten now by people.
Yeah.
But this movie is pretty much a direct play off of that. We meet Nada, and he's out of work. He's down on his luck. He has nothing but the rucksack, his bindle on his back, and he gets into a construction scene, and then he discovers a lot more is going on as he kind of finds a home in a shanty town, and there's a lot of mysterious goings on. But you know, a lot of that actually. Like much of the script, you know, some of the lines were ad-libbed. I mean, Piper does take credit for the "I'm all out of gum," you know, a line.
Yeah, that wasn't ad-lib though. That was it was his.
You're right.
Like I've seen interviews on both where like I ad-libbed it, but then most interviews I saw with Carpenter. Where it was like, oh no, he had this little book of sayings that he would use for wrestling, and that's sort of the one we really liked, and I liked it. And even Piper said, yeah, John liked that one, so I ended up using that one. So
I mean, you know, no discredit to him. He wrote the line, and it's genius.
Absolutely, of course.
But I will say also, his story. I know we're not turning into the Roddy Piper cast, but we all love him, and you know, I'm a huge fan. And, you know, the story about him leaving home when he was 13 and his father and all that, that's actually very close to Roddy's own story. I mean, he left home when he was, I didn't know that. Yeah, he left home when he was 15 and, you know, had some pretty rough adventures in his life and had, you know.
In Canada? You can have in Canada?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he had a very difficult life. So I think maybe that was also part of the reason why Carpenter cast him, that he knew that Piper had this everyman quality, and also fantastic mullet. I mean, he is kind of a stand-in for Kurt Russell in a lot of ways.
Well, I saw somewhere that this was originally he wanted Kurt Russell but then the Carpenter was like, well, I just did like 100 films with him, so let me try to find somebody else or something like that. Yeah.
So it's like when
I can see Kurt Russell in this.
So it's like when a guy marries the same woman over and over again. He went out and found a leading man who was just like Kurt Russell.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I do like
the acting chops.
I do like the you mentioned that like Roddy Piper looks like an everyday hero, right? Like he's not privileged, he's underprivileged.
Yeah.
And anyone could be Roddy Piper. And I think that's something John Carpenter does with most of his movies, really. I think maybe Halloween is the only one where you can see the people that Michael Myers is killing is like in a more higher end, or at least high middle class suburb. But everyone else, like Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, all of his characters are very, very down to earth, everyday people.
Yeah, I mean that's something that John Carpenter, I think, is like, he was very adamant about that. He openly hates capitalism, and he hates
Reagan,
Ronald Reagan, and he loves making money, but he doesn't. He, you know, as he said, but he doesn't like endless greed or endless capitalism. He really hates, and that's why he kind of really latched onto the story.
But we should say that it was based on that short story, 8 o'clock in the morning, by Ray Nelson, was it? And and then that in turn was turned into a comic called Nada by Nelson and Bill Ray. I think a couple years before the movie came out. Now the short story was, I was like, oh, let me find it. It was online, and it's like 6 pages, so I read it. The comic was online. I read it, and definitely there are definitely similarities, obviously, except for the look of the aliens. Like in the comic and in the story, it's talking about they're really alien looking, like with multiple eyes and yellow and green. And then Carpenter talked about how, no, I wanted it to look like corrupt humans. So almost like that what we see nowadays, that exhibition. What's the one where it's like bodies, where you just see
it is totally like bodies.
It's kind of like that, where you basically see a human form without the skin, so kind of thing. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting to what that were.
When he so Nada discovers that this group is trying to do something, and they're making all these sunglasses, and then he puts on the sunglasses, and in a very famous moment, he sees that a billboard actually says "Obey." And of course, this led to Shep Fairey's career. I mean, and incredibly, you know, his whole his imagery on, you know, also with Andre the Giant, obviously, is definitely a comment on They Live. And but then there you go, nice, John, you're right on it, John.
Well done.
So we could have one that says Comics Insider.
We do. We all need to work on our now that we're going live on YouTube. We're on the big stage now, guys. Anyway, so Nada discovers that the world is under the control of these hideous aliens, and they are putting out subliminal messages that are encouraging people just to be consumers, to submit to capitalism, not to think for themselves. And he sets about trying to set this right. And at the end, he seems to have spoilers. I'm sure you've seen They Live. If you haven't, maybe he has a victory. Maybe it's a tragic victory. So you'll have to watch the movie to find out.
Rewind a second, because we did talk about how, like, this is definitely a metaphor, you know, not really a metaphor, it's in your face, about capitalism, Reagan. But I'm also curious, it just came to me now, when Roddy Piper, when he starts noticing the weirdness, it happens at the church across the street. Is that also, I didn't see anything about that. Is that also maybe something saying about the church he's trying to say, like, it's corrupt? I don't know.
Well, I
don't
know
see anything in the research, but
but if you notice, it's like the church is the place where the freedom fighters are are seeking refuge, and they're hiding, you know. So I'm not sure if there's a comment there about that.
Okay, so my comment was done. Thank you. All right, great.
No, it's a discussion.
I think a lot of this, I think everything in this movie is open to interpretation and to discussion.
Because the place isn't, the church isn't like acting as a church. It's just a front. There's a scene where where Roddy Piper goes closer and he hears like the choir singing, but it's just according to mask their stuff. So I don't think John Carpenter is saying like the church is a great ally in any of this. It's just like, this is what was available, and apparently no one suspects the church. So
so that's what I meant.
Maybe. I mean, the idea that the church is a false front, you know, but it could be, you know, in this case, it was being used for you know, good purposes, as far as we can tell in the movie. I mean, I've been thinking about They Live a lot in our times, because obviously in the conformist 80s, its message was very much one of you know, rebellion, open your eyes, don't be consumed by the media. This is pre-internet, so but everything in it still is just as, you know, I mean, if they've been talking about a remake, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I mean, all of the methods that they use in this method are already the ones that they would use on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, this had drones before drones were a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. But obviously now in this world, in the world of 2020, where we're on our 17th episode of almost weekly Zoomcasts that we started because we're in lockdown and can't go out and do things.
Yes.
So in this world, it's almost the other way. Like we have QAnon, we have all of these conspiracy theories that are saying that they are the ones that have the truth. So
in fact, John Carpenter had to at one point not too long ago come out and say, look, this movie is not about conspiracy theorists, specifically regarding like Jewish conspiracies that are trying to take over. He had to come out on Twitter and say, this movie is about yuppies and capitalism. And there's
it's
no
not
two ways
anti-Semitic.
It's not anti-Semitic at all. And I think you'd have to like really not watch the movie to think that it's for Jewish conspiracy, because it's so clear, like the aliens themselves are usually really high privileged rich people, right? Mostly, or people who get corrupted into thinking that they should be part of the alien group, and they always talk about a lot of humans selling out to the aliens. So it's definitely it's like you said, Jimmy, the message is so in your face, that there's no mistaking it, really.
But I do.
Night of the Living Dead is anti-communist and pro-war, which is the opposite.
But I think that the danger and the problem with powerful direct messages like this movie is people can push their agenda onto it and spin it in certain ways, and I think that's happened a lot of times with other media and everything.
Absolutely.
So it's really dangerous, I guess, in that regard.
I mean, I guess that was the question that I was thinking about, as we've gone from 1988 to 2020, is this movie now more dangerous as a message that QAnons can latch onto, as opposed to being a down with the man of capitalism that it was when it came out?
Absolutely. I think John just said it. Yeah, it's like anybody will just take whatever they want and corrupt it. You could take any comic, any TV, any film, and somebody can find a way to twist it. I could make like this coffee I just had is actually a product of Mormonism. I don't know. It's like I can find some way to tie it in. It's like it's ridiculous the lengths people go in some of the conspiracy theories I've seen out there.
I agree with John, said it perfectly. I think today, if it would come out today, or if you see it today, like we just did, you could latch on to the fake news part, right? And then all of these media are telling you that Trump's Russia investigation, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, that's just CNN telling you to obey and marry and reproduce, and go Democrat. So I think, like we can see it, and we can definitely see that it is from the other side. All of these people saying that America has to be great again, and that they're just telling us to obey, but the same can go from the other side.
Yeah, like I'm a family of 10 living in a one-room shanty, that would support, this, yes, we're great already, whatever like that. They could tell it could easily be turned around, and people's minds twisted so easily to see what they want to see and believe. So there you go.
There you go. There is
as this grows, you're going to be one of the producers for sure.
Yeah, right. You definitely, John. You have to say something though. So.
Oh, say what?
Oh no.
There you go.
Yeah, but just because what? No. You have to talk because we're just now that we're live streaming. Only
right. Oh, so I have to talk so then people can see it there. But the interesting thing is, there was actually an Indiegogo campaign to get this very image on a billboard in Times Square, and I think they succeeded. And I think
oh really,
it was in Times Square, and it's an artist that's actually trying to put this image on billboards across the country.
It's not Shepard Fairey, it's somebody else.
I'm not sure. But
but I think I saw that news as well. But even even going back to the previous point, the ending becomes much more strange to grapple with, right? Because it all converges in a TV station.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now
Yeah.
that could be CNN, it could be Fox News,
Mhm.
but the attack has been definitely more against the more left center news
Yeah.
outlets.
Mhm.
So yeah.
What
Oh,
what I
man,
find
I'm scared.
interesting, yeah, what I find interesting is now watching it only days ago is the clear influence this movie has had, because I started noticing, I'm like, oh, that was in this, that was in that movie, this movie used that, this movie homage to that. And then
This
John and I
is
were texting last night about like video games, movies,
Mhm.
and actual music videos and all this other stuff.
this is where
are
we
using
call
it.
this Comic Beat Insider, the education of Jimmy, because it is like when Jimmy has put on the sunglasses where he suddenly sees the stream of media influences that, yes,
Oh my God.
it's all they live. All they live.
It's
Yeah.
all of
The
it.
cat is the only one that's normal. So
No surprise.
wow. The cat's actually ruined us all, actually. Yeah, so we were talking, like, supposed to be getting to the fight soon, but like, there's so many great. I was looking up. I'm like, oh yeah, I played. Did anyone ever play Saints Row? That video
Yeah.
game series. I
Mhm.
love that series, and I didn't. I slightly remember, like, wasn't there a Roddy Piper? Because I know Keith David was a character and a voice
Yeah.
in it.
Mm.
And I looked it up online. I'm like, oh yeah, I did play this. And Roddy Piper appears in the game, and there's a whole mission called He Lives, and it's
Yeah.
basically you're the character running around. You're your character running around. You walk in on the alley fight.
Nice.
And it's Keith, but it's Keith David as himself and Roddy Piper as himself. And in the world of Saints Row 4, aliens have taken over,
Mhm.
and so you're fighting the aliens. So in the alley fight, Roddy Piper, just like in the movie, is trying to wake up, Keith. Come on, you got to see, So then after a little skirmish, Piper or Keith David takes off because he has superpowers in this game, so he just jumps and disappears. So the character and Roddy start talking. He's like, we got to get Keith back to our side. So they run to a TV station to try to focus. Keith is there trying to give this message that Zinyak, the ruler of the aliens, rules all. He's the whatever. So they go into, then the character has to fight off these robots while, again, Keith and David do another big fight. It's this great big fight scene in the video game.
Wow.
And then later on, you can unlock Keith David and Roddy Piper to play as characters. So that's
Oh.
so, and like, I didn't get that till now. It's the movie. I'm like, oh shit, that's really the movie. Look at that.
Yeah, and I think they also, I think they animated shot for shot the fight in South Park.
Oh, they did. Yes, I watched it
Yeah.
again last night.
It was like
Yeah,
the Timmy
between Jimmy and
character.
Timmy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a Timmy versus Jimmy, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think I wrote it down. I think Jimmy is Frank and
Mhm.
Timmy is Nada. Yes, and there's a video out there that shows it shot for shot. It's not completely 100% shot,
Yeah.
the 5-6 minute scene, but there's moments where they show the shot for shot, like almost the exact same moves, some of the same lines. It's brilliant. And again, I remember seeing that episode of something go, this fight's going on forever. This is great.
Yeah.
No idea it was from
And
They Lives.
Didn't the Family Guy fight scenes between this guy
Him
and
and the chicken.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a parody of that.
Yeah, I never even thought
yeah.
about that.
And it gets
Yeah.
and it gets crazier and crazier. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. But
Well, go on, Ricky. Go on.
no, but fighting, looking at the fight itself, like when I saw it yesterday again, it's like a Fight Club fight scene, but it also has a lot of wrestling in it as well, like actual wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, like
suplexes
like
and
two or
stuff,
three punches, and then all of a sudden someone does a suplex, and then someone does punch to the groin or whatever. You can almost hear the bell.
I mean, it is just, and of course it's just shot, like close up. There's no cutting. I mean, obviously this movie was made in the 80s before all that, but I mean, you are not missing out on any of the action in this.
And it is 5.5 minutes long.
Now, Jimmy and John, you are stage actors, and John, you do
We're also fighters. We both do.
You do fighting, right? Both you guys
did.
So walk us through it. Walk us through this fight, or what should we know about it?
Well, it was choreographed, and it was not improv. You saw some articles, people like, oh, they did a lot. No. Fighting is choreographed. It's choreography.
They did. They took 3 weeks to choreograph it, and they shot.
Jeff Amata, is he the fight coordinator? Jeff Amata.
It's 2 weeks to rehearse it and figure it out, and then 3 days of shooting. So that took 3 days to shoot.
Yeah.
And I wish fights would go back to this, where it's wide shots, long shots, and no steady cam. You know, there's no shaky cam or anything. It's just like let them fight. And it's just it's one of those fights that are so incredible, is because it tells a story, and it's a story. And what I was doing some research, and Roddy was saying that this is a fight between two people who like each other,
who are friends. Yeah.
And I think that's a really incredible thing to think about, because it's so true, and you could see it. The fact that he swings a 2x4 and almost knocks his head off, and then is like, oh, I'm sorry.
Shit, sorry, man.
And then when Keith breaks his hand, or breaks the glass and hurts his hand, and Roddy laughs a little. There's a
like
camaraderie
a
there.
Yeah,
but it's so visceral, and it's like, and it's not a martial arts fight. This is not something that came out of Hong Kong.
It's a brawl. It's an alley brawl, literally.
And we don't get a lot of those anymore, because I think.
Well, that's the thing I wanted to mention was they said they sort of loosely based it on John Wayne's fight in The Quiet Man, which I went and watched, and that scene is long, but it's not a continuous fight. Even if they live, they pause for like a minute, like a second or two, but not very long. It does continue. In Quiet Man, there's whole scenes of them hanging out, then they just start fighting again. It's like this weird like 4-stage fight. So it's not continuous. This is probably one of the longest continuous ones. I'll get to which one I think is longer, a couple of them, but yeah, I did like the fact that it did seem a little more like, we bitch about realism in fights, and we all marveled at the Daredevil hallway fight, how realistic that seemed, because people would get up, they wouldn't just be knocked out, and that's what I loved about this. It did seem two big guys, like Keith was also in really good shape.
Two big construction workers. These aren't military guys. These aren't police officers. These guys are not technically trained. Maybe they were in their high school wrestling team or something. But like it's like, just like Nada is like an everyman, this is like an everyman fight, and you don't get to see that a lot, even in like these like fancy pants, like in Roadhouse, again, like supposed to be everyman, you know what I mean? And that's a great movie with some great fights, but like Patrick Swayze is like a martial artist in that movie.
Well, that's the thing people were saying is about they're trying to I was doing my research of like longest fights. People are like, oh, all these martial arts films. Like, yeah, but this one guy taking on 100 people, and it can last. Like the Jackie Chan Drunken Masters fights are really long, but they're not also continuous either, and it is a lot of kung fu.
There's a lot of wire work. I mean, there's a lot of, which is fine. It's awesome.
Not so much in the Jackie Chan stuff. Listen, I know my kung fu. All right.
To John's point as to how the fight tells a story, I think those seconds long pauses are really interesting, because it kind of gives you the sense that, okay, this guy isn't getting it yet. That doesn't mean I get to give up. I still need to beat this into him so that he knows that I'm doing this for his own good. And I think that's part of like the heart of the movie is in that scene, because it is telling you sometimes you have to get your friends, kick them in the nuts for a little while to get them to get a point. and when I came out of it, I was like, Piper, this isn't a fight that's done out of maliciousness or anything. Piper really cares about this guy. And he's not there to kill him. He's there to like punch him into recognizing that something's really, really bad out there.
The stakes are very high in the fight, because we also want Frank, Keith David's character, to open his eyes, to put on these glasses and see the world as it is. Roddy Piper, as much as we love him, he was not known as a great wrestler. He was always a brawler. I mean, he did not have the moves. He was no Bret Hart. But so it's a bit of a brawl. But talking about the fight, Keith David is a big guy. He's like 6'6" or something. I mean, in the fight, like where they're training, Rowdy's just told him, he says, you know what, just hit me anywhere in the hair. Don't hold back. Just hit me. That's fine. I can take care of it.
And he did a couple of times. He talks about Keith was like, I accidentally, he said I saw like some panel he did where he embarrassed it, like EW showed up that day. They just he did the interview. Yes, it's all choreographed. We pull punches, safety, distance control, the three main things of, fight choreography and stage combat. And he goes, in the first shot, I punch him in the face. Roddy's like, it's fine. Keep going. Roddy can take it. But what I think also about when I first saw the fight though, I just thought it was ridiculous. I was like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. But then I got it, and kind of like when I watched it again, I was like, okay, it is sort of a real fight. Might take a little longer, might not just be over like that, you know. So
yeah, and your heart stops when Keith almost steps on the glasses.
Yes.
I was just gonna say that. There's like there are peaks and valleys to the fight, which is so great. And the fact when he almost steps on the glasses, it's like one of those heart-stopping moments. It's so well done.
Yeah, you're like, no. And also no music. There's no music.
Yeah.
It's just bare bones, knuckle busted fight. And I mean, I think Jimmy, probably your research, obviously, but Carpenter just said, I mean, obviously he was inspired by having a professional wrestler as a star who he knew could go the distance. And he said,
he asked him to throw in some.
He said, let me have this over the top fight. And, almost 6 minutes. I mean, that doesn't sound like that long, but in a movie, also this movie's very short.
Fight that's really long.
Barely like an hour and a half. It's like there's an hour and 38 minutes. It's a very brief movie. So this is like a huge segment of the movie is taken up by this.
Boxing rounds are 3 minutes. So it's like that's a long fight. And that's why when I started looking more about longer fights, and a lot of them came across like sword fights. Of course, there's longer sword fights in a lot of kung fu films, amazing ones. But I think a few I found, like that fight between Uma Thurman and Vivica Fox in Kill Bill. It's only about 3 to 4 minutes, but that is intense. And there's a little bit of break in between. But they're in the Raid 2, the kitchen fight. It's 6.5 minutes long, and it is pure nonstop fighting. And
oh my God.
Glorious. I mean, there's probably a couple others that are around that area. Maybe some they use weapons. Well, they kind of use weapons here. They had a 2x4, they had a bottle. Whatever they could grab in the alley. So same thing with the kitchen scene in the Raid 2 where they were just grabbing stuff. But there's quite a few brawls that have gone. People are like, oh, in Star Wars. I'm like, that's a lightsaber. It's all CGI. But it's not really a fight. It's like, that's not a fight. That's a beautiful dance.
Yeah.
But these fist fights and these brawls, I think the Raid 2 tops in. There's probably maybe a couple others I missed, but yeah, it's still, doesn't take away from this fight at all,
this is definitely like an American filmmaking, the fight.
Yeah,
I think the John Wick 3 had some long fights, Raid fights, of course, but yeah.
But I will say, because it's like pretty much bare knuckle, and I give major kudos to the sound designers to make those hits sound so intense. It's not like an Indiana Jones punch, which is like you're punching through like 6 or 7 wood planks, but it's still really intense. And it's like without music also, it's like that is the soundscape. It's like them like grunting and the incredible like impact punches.
And that's important what John just said about the grunting. It's like that's what you learn. That's what fight choreography is. The acting comes in, is selling it. So John and I both have Sage Combat background, and John he worked at the theater company here in town called Vampire Cowboys, and every show they had an amazing fight choreography in it. And John was in many of those fights. So talk a little bit about selling, the idea of selling.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to talk to both of you guys because this is something that's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like also, it's like, it's also in professional wrestling. It's like you're never as good, or you're not as good at how am I supposed to word this? The punch I throw isn't as good unless you react to how good it is. And I think you've got a professional.
Like here we go, John. Ready?
Oh yeah.
See, there you go.
So easy.
Yeah.
Wow, it's magic. How do they do
it's
it?
like you have Roddy Piper who's teaching Keith how to sell. Like and it's like, and everything is sold really well, and it's just not a physical movement, but it's a audible movement. It's all that kind of thing, and it's just like I still would put this fight up against a lot of fights now that are made nowadays. It's still like
I have another fight that might be because the important about selling and acting and being a good actor, because you can see terrible fights. So if people they don't react well, you're like, oh, that's not happening at all. You can see maybe a not so well choreographed fight, but the actors are really good. It sells it for you. If I may toot my own horn for a minute, I did a production of King Lear in college, and I was Edgar, and there's a fight between Edgar and Edmund at the end. And of course, Shakespeare doesn't choreograph it. He goes, they fight, So my fight choreographer, Casey Stetson, was this amazing choreographer. and she, I was sort of her protege at the time, and she, you know, was under her wing, and she wanted this to be like a long brawl, sort of like The Duelist. You ever see that film, The Duelist, a long sword fight? And who knows, maybe she even brought up They Live. I don't know, I can't remember. So we ended up doing the fight scene. It was 15 minutes long. We did it in 4 stages. Where we first started, where we were like,
Wow.
we like in the Beat It video, where we're like arms wrapped together. We had daggers. And then we would sort of do like a call, like the Earl of Gloucester would raise his hand, you know, and be like, okay, next round, you know. Then we would have like shields and bucklers. And of course we have blood packs. It's going everywhere and we're selling it. At one point I even got like Keith David, my partner wasn't as experienced as I was. And when I went to go block his mace hit, he hit my hand with the mace. And it wasn't super sharp. It still cut me though. And I definitely bled.
Yeah.
And then we went from bucklers and shields to like hand to hand. Then we went like actual swords. And it was like by the end of it, we were just like, because we're live on stage. This is no cuts, no whatever like that. But the fact that we had to sell that, you know, we have to like sell this long fight and like throughout the progress of it, show how tired it literally made us tired as obviously on stage. But that's something that they have to do in film though, is like with continuous cuts and takes, sell the length of the okay, where am I in my exhaustion, where am I in my, you know, and how hurt I am, things like that. But doing it live is very different obviously. But yeah, that was one of my favorite fights I've ever done.
Wow, that's
a long time now.
That's quite a task, a 15-minute fight. That's
at the end of King Lear. And then I had
talk about going the distance.
And I had a speech afterwards where I'm like bleeding. I'm like, I remember the night when he cut my hand, and we had gloves on. This is totally, I'm sorry, it's a sidebar to Jimmy's show. Sorry. And so I knew I was bleeding, but it didn't feel that bad. But I remember taking off and holding my head because he hit me in the head too as part of the choreography. And I felt blood dripping down from my head. And I thought, oh my God, is my head bleeding? So I'm doing the speech. I get off stage and my glove just sort of slides off. But it's also, I wasn't sure what was the fake blood, what was the real blood. We had so much fake blood. At one point I bit into, I spit some out. You know, that's always the best blood pack, spitting them out. John can attest. And I had this baby little cut. That's all I had. But it was just one of those cuts that just bleeds profusely. So I was like, spraying it up. It was like nothing. I thought I was dying the whole time. But yeah, those little things could last a long time. Anyway, They Live. But they little sidebar to Jimmy's life. So yeah.
But speaking of length of long fights, in the script for They Live, John Carpenter literally wrote "they fight," and then but then he left 5 pages blank. So he made sure that everyone knew that like this is important. This fight is important. So
that's great.
Yeah. So
what was your longest fight, John, in a show?
Every day, my friend. Every day.
My Girl Battle World had some pretty intense fights. It's a pretty long.
Yeah.
For sure.
Ricky, go on. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say I've never had to like sell a punch because each punch I've ever received in my life has been. But you should always in those fights see the other guy. So
yeah, there you go.
Well, I was going to say, to bring it back to They Live. I mean, I think Carpenter's idea behind this film was to be real, you know, to show a very, very, you know, not a grab realism, a reality, and having this really real, long, drawn out fight was part of that idea, just of realism, of showing the world as it is and not as we're being told it is. So, I mean, that's another part of the thematic, you know, of how this fight fits into it. I will say, I mean, the movie is, it doesn't look slick at all. I mean, it had a tiny budget, $4 million.
Yeah.
Even then,
it looks like it was shot on video. Maybe,
it does not. It's not a lot of money at all, and you can see they use props from other movies like a
PKE meter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, from Ghostbusters.
Yes, the Ghostbusters. Yes.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
But you know, that is absolutely. I think he wanted it also purposely just to have this real quotidian feeling. I mean, downtown LA is so. You know, they go stay in this shanty town, and you know, there's still shanty towns in downtown LA. You know, 32 years later, not a lot has changed.
Yeah, speaking of that shanty town, that was a real shanty town.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I was like, wow.
they just paid the people living there as extras, and they just inserted
Which is great.
their players and stuff.
Yeah.
Something that I took away from the movie was and it's kind of sad, is that first initial raid on the shantytown. I was like, wow, this is really passive compared to the news nowadays. Obviously not, when they get to like the news station, it escalates to like a action movie level of violence, but it's kind of sad that you see worse violence in real life now when it comes to like people just living and the police coming in, than in a hyper fictionalized movie as it's supposed to be.
And the thing that I noticed about the scene where the police clear out the shantytown is that there's, by today's standards, they're unarmed. I mean, they're just guys in police uniforms with these plexiglass shields and their regular weapons. Whereas now, I mean, I cannot believe these scenes that we see of our police in, like, they look, you know, I play Marvel Strike Force. I've told you about Marvel Strike. I mean, they look like the characters in Marvel Strike Force, you know, literally in real world on our streets. So yeah, this is definitely another thing. Absolutely, John, I was totally thinking about that as well.
But also how the movie, the themes and how you can read it changes in a matter of weeks. Like if you were to see this movie before the Black Lives Matter movement like rose up again after the recent killings, then yeah, you could say that it's a little bit more up for grabs left or right. But the police raid scenes, the ending, it's pretty hard not to link that to police brutality. So if I were to say right now, They Live is definitely more on the side of, you know, social movements and more social justice rather than on the other side, you know. So but it's fascinating because not a lot of movies can, like at a week's notice, change what their message is going to be, you know. And it's incredible. But also Carpenter does that a lot with all of these other movies, like in terms of it feeling authentic and highly debatable, because all the other especially The Thing, I feel there are no fancy scientists. Everyone looks like they were like, this is the only scientist we have and we just found him in a bar, you know, like you know,
best place to hang out for scientists.
Exactly. So that quality of having everyday people around you also gives the movie like added political punch, right? Like this is not people from the universities fighting against the established order. This is this guy who understands the world as he sees it, and he's a wrestler. So that's what he's gonna fight like for his part of reality.
Yeah, and in regards to the background of the Nada character, or I guess Roddy Piper has and other people in the cast later on have titled him John Nada, or like, you know, apparently
it was in the credits as John Nada, right?
No, he's just not Nada in the credits.
Oh, okay, yeah, he's never mentioned in the movie, I know, but it's just not in the credits. Okay.
Yeah, but apparently I heard Roddy say that John Carpenter was like, I don't want to know this guy's backstory. I want you to know his backstory.
Yes,
you alone.
yeah, I saw that.
So, you know, like, we don't really know anything about John Nada, and we never will, because unfortunately Roddy Piper has passed away.
That's interesting about the physicality of having a wrestler there, because he had, like, wrestlers have to wear their stories on their sleeves.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think Kurt Russell might not have been able to project.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
You know, like Kurt Russell needed the story and needed to act it out. So like in other movies he's done with John Carpenter, you kind of get more exposition behind them. You see Roddy Piper immediately, like Heidi said, with the backpack and everything. You're like, I know who this guy is.
Yeah.
Well, when he was 13 years old, Kurt Russell was the computer wore tennis shoes. You know, Piper's life was a very
Kurt
different
Russell
life.
Stand over there.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean it's you know, I mean actually that's a really great point, Ricky. Yeah. That you know, as great an actor as Kurt Russell is and everything, I mean, you know, he's an actor, he's an actor who's been in Disney movies his whole you know, so
he's done a bit more than that, but yeah.
No, but I'm just saying, I mean, he was, you know, he was a kid in all these movies, you know, and you know, I mean, like you could not have more diametrically opposed childhoods than Roddy Piper and Kurt Russell is what I'm just
Right.
trying to say. So
Totally.
Well, I want to real quick go back to we talked about the police brutality thing. The scene where Roddy is trying to escape at night and he sees the kid and grabs him and he walks past the blind preacher getting beaten.
that scene.
I mean, it's like
that scene.
Oh my God, that's so.
Well, it's the blind preacher and the scientist, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's like those are two people.
Okay. Yeah,
it's like
the voice of the broadcast.
The voice of reason, as it were.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, like two unarmed, peaceful people getting attacked, and again, that's very present to, unfortunately, what's happening today a lot.
I think I've said on here, I think when we talked about Starship Troopers, which to be honest, this episode is definitely kind of a follow-up to Starship Troopers in terms of movies from the past that are super resonant, genre movies from the past that are super resonant in the present. And I think I mentioned then that, things that might have happened would just be too on the nose, except they're actually happening in the real world now. And I mean, that scene in They Live, absolutely. Like, if you're watching the movie, you're like, oh yeah, they're beating up a blind preacher. And, unfortunately we've seen this, happen on every day, like so many times. So it's really, I agree, Jimmy, that was a gut punch. That was a real gut punch watching that.
And that's something that basically Carpenter and his screenwriter added, because as Jimmy said, the comic and the story are so short. Like, I don't think they have anything related to the police other than just
not really.
We don't even get the sunglasses. The original story, the main character is just in a trance by a hypnotist, and the hypnotist apparently did too good of a job. And he broke the illusion. But I do like that in both the original story and the movie, the ending is kind of kept intact.
Yeah.
There was no way this guy was gonna live at the end, which still has me thinking, like, usually this type of character would live. It's important that he doesn't live in this one.
Fight on, in
a movie in the 80s where Arnold Schwarzenegger had us all convinced that heroes live at the end. Having the main character Roddy Piper himself and Keith dying so unceremoniously.
It's like boom.
It's a gut. It's a gut.
So annoyed by that.
We haven't talked about Meg Foster in this movie at all, and but we should, because she went on. Wasn't she Lacey, Cagney and Lacey?
She was a little bit.
Yeah.
She wasn't one of them.
Replaced, I think.
Maybe.
What's her?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, she was replaced. Yeah, she started out in, I think there was the original Cagney and Lacey.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was like, she wasn't one of them. Okay.
Yeah. So
she gave me my first laugh out loud moment in the movie. Like the bubblegum scene, that's funny, haha. But like literally when she's standing there and breaks a bottle of his head and throws him out the freaking glass door, I started cracking up. It was so ridiculous. Like this fucking 200-something pound man just fucking tosses out.
I mean, have you ever taken a bottle to the head for real?
Yeah,
you never
I mean,
know.
come on, Yeah.
I have. It hurts, but
but
selling something, because when he falls from the window and gets up, he looks so banged up.
So good. But I mean, I think Meg Foster was obviously supporting cast in here. I know Jimmy will get to your recast, because they have talked about doing a remake of this movie.
Yeah, 2010
that isn't like the evening news, but obviously Keith David, the part was written for him. I mean, so great, so good. Just such a great role for him and such a great presence. And with Meg Foster, you do question the first time you see her if she's an alien or not. I mean,
those eyes.
Her eyes. Absolutely.
Her eyes. Yeah.
The funny thing is, a year before this, and prior to me seeing, so also a year before this, but also before I saw They Live, I loved Masters of the Universe, the motion picture, and she's Evelyn in it. So when I finally saw this, I was like, "What is Evelyn doing here? She's not good. There's no way she's good."
Knew this was not going to end up well. But I mean, I think that's perfect casting. I mean, there's just no one else who could have.
I was suspicious of her from the beginning, though. Even like when he just because the eyes, I'm like, okay, she's not alien, but I don't know if she's going to be too good. And then sure enough, she becomes like a collaborator or falls for them.
But a human collaborator.
Right. Which we see another one was played by Yeah, the Grifter was George Buckflower, who is well-known character actor and everything. He was a Drifter first, and he showed up later as a collaborator.
And
well, I
Back to
think
the
that-
Future, right?
Mhm.
He's
What's that?
the bum in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. He played
Yeah.
a bum in a couple movies. I was
Yeah.
looking up. Yeah.
So, that was another thing I was going to bring up though, was that that I think that whole scene where we see the Drifter is now in a tuxedo. He's at this fancy dinner, and he's sold out, because that's the other line, we all sell out every day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I mean, it just shows that the temptation is very real for people.
Yeah, I do it. Whatever.
And yeah, it's like, again, it's the taking the Reaganite era message and projecting it forward, but that's
I want my champagne and oysters. I'd be sorry, guys, but I'm
you would be-
I'm gonna go live a
you
good
would be
life. See ya.
Joey Pants in the Matrix. Huh? You love that stain.
Hell yes.
I can
I don't
kind of
wanna know-
see.
I don't want to know about any of this other crap going on. In my 20s, maybe even my early 30s, I would have been the freedom fighter. Now I'm old. I'm like, no, give me some comfort. Forget it.
Yeah.
And
like
George
someone comes up to
Buckflowers,
you.
yeah. George
Yeah.
Buckflowers, he plays Smarty so great. Like, where he's like, come on, guys, look at this. We got Richard here. We got, isn't that great? And then he's like, bloop, bye.
Yeah.
He's so great. I love him.
So just one other note about the filmmaking here. As I mentioned, it's a very short movie. It's barely an hour. I think it's an hour and 40 minutes. And they have talked about remaking it, and I couldn't help. So, confession, if you read the beat, when I do my movies, I very often fall asleep, and I did fall asleep right at the end of this movie. I had a long day at the dog park yesterday. I was really dehydrated. That's my only excuse.
Yeah.
So then I woke up and I rewound and watched it, but I had only missed about 12 minutes of the film. Like, from when they get to the villain's lair, well, it's a little longer. It's about 20 minutes. But from when the fight intensifies, from Nada and Frank are, with their guns, and it's very
they
short.
Jump in the portal. Yeah, they jump
really
in the portal,
only 12 minutes. And I'm like, if they remade this movie, I mean, this would probably be half the movie, because nowadays they have to have all the other jeopardy. There has to be a ticking time bomb. There would have to be cross-cutting between someone else is about to get sucked into the vortex, and somebody else dropped the wrench, and they've you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
It's like today's action films are like, so I mean, sometimes enjoyable, sometimes just bloated, video game bloated. But I really appreciated the economy of storytelling in this film.
Yeah,
I think that
you watch a lot of movie in that hour and a half that it takes to see it.
Yeah.
But I will say that if it gets remade, I would, first of all, I would like to see the character become female. And I would definitely cast a female wrestler as well.
Interesting.
I want someone who can also carry their stories, like, physically, and also to honor the movie, and the things that it did do. And I think that would be a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I think without a doubt it would have to. It should be someone of color as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
You'll hear what I have to say.
Oh yeah, Jimmy's got it.
But just real quick, about the remake, they said, I guess the last thing on Wiki said was in the fall of 2010 there was development on it, with Carpenter set to produce. Matt Reeves had signed up to direct and write the screenplay, of all people. Mr. Batman. The project also shifted from being a remake of They Live to a re-adaptation of 8 O'Clock in the Morning, the short story, ditching the satirical and political elements. Well, that's not the movie at all. Since then, there have been no new announcements at all.
I think it's almost too much to remake this movie, to be honest. I mean, I think it's almost too much where the real world that we live in, that remaking it as an action movie would be
missing the point.
I feel like you need to find a screenwriter that does like political sci-fi really well. Or maybe it's not meant to be a television, or maybe it's meant to be a television thing. Like maybe HBO should handle it, or
I think maybe a series.
Oh,
a series.
Hey, Damon Lindelof, I'm sure you're listening. Damon, you did great with The Watchmen. I never thought I would say that, but you did. Maybe you should do They Live next. That might be your next. Or somebody
in the room now.
Somebody should do that. So before we get to the recasting, I have one other point. And that's something I've been thinking about here, actually, while we're talking. And it's actually, I mean, I'll say, I think watching They Live made me very sad, and because of everything that the resonance of the real world. And then our talking about the fight today, where you said it was a fight between friends, really made me think about how that's kind of how things are today, where there's so many polarized sides. And, you know, I mean, I still have some friends who disagree with me politically, believe it or not. But, you know, I mean, it's a struggle sometimes to stay friends because of everything else. And I mean, we have an understanding, but I do see also when, you know, people are desperate to tell their friends the truth, you know, to get them to see the truth. They're desperate to get them to put on those glasses. And I mean, that's kind of, unfortunately, like if you have friends who, you know, might have views other than your own, or, you know, who, you know, fall into these QAnon aliens came and had sex with me in the night, and, you know,
my cousin.
Yeah, right. So unfortunately, we all have somebody that we care about in our lives, maybe who's kind of,
I don't know about that, but
or used to care about, but yeah. And so I don't know, the fight now, to me, as we were just talking about it, I realized it's kind of a horrible metaphor for Facebook.
In submission,
I mean,
like, listen to
that's
me.
the thing. I mean, you could simply replace the sunglasses with masks and be like, you know, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, you know, we've now been told, like, you can't shame people into wearing masks. Like, that's not the right way to go. But people still aren't wearing them.
Why not?
Roddy Piper would have just scrammed it in your face.
But it's funny how the non-maskers can shame people for wearing masks, so that's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, but to Heidi's point, when I saw the fight, I kind of felt not necessarily sad, but let's say nostalgic, for lack of a better term, because the fight did have a result. And in Twitter and social media and media in general, the fight is usually, I'm going to hit you just to show you that I'm right. I don't care if you think I'm right. I'm going to beat you into submission. So you can see that my point is the real one, and I'm going to destroy you publicly. Whereas the fight between these two guys in the movie is more genuine and honest, and like there's a real worry behind it. I don't see that happening in today's world as much as it should have. If that were the fight, if that were the type of dynamic, I would be doling out more punches out in the street gratuitously, you know, like left and right. Hey, look that. But yeah, I kind of felt more frustrated, because if we could get back to that type of fighting, then that's worth having.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to touch on one last thing real quick, was the soundtrack. I know Carpenter wrote it himself with, I forgot who, sorry, the other person he wrote, but I just found it interesting that it was they didn't take advantage of the music of the 80s. Like, there's so much great, like, pop and rock that could have been in there, like, during the fight scene. I could have had, like, Bon Jovi's Dead or Alive, or Living on a Prayer, like, Alone in My Heart, like, Jefferson Starship, Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now, like, Here I Go Again, Whitesnake. People Are Strange.
Wear your sunglasses at night.
Exactly. Sunglasses at night.
But I will say that is like John Carpenter doesn't do that in any of his movies.
He never does.
John Carpenter, the guy who writes with him, Alan Howarth is his name.
Yeah, I think so.
And he like, they collaborated up until, I think, Prince of Darkness or something, maybe. I'm not sure, but like, that's just the way John Carpenter is. And if you think about it that way, it's like, you know, it was a very bluesy, everyman, simple soundscape. And I think it's like, I would love to hear that kind of, like, I would love to hear catchy music of the time period, but what a capitalist thing to do, you know what I mean?
For sure. You know, that makes sense. Fair enough. Well, come on, you see Roddy Piper walking on the street by himself with, like, here I go again on my own.
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a YouTube. You could make a YouTube re-edit.
You could just make it your re-edit there, Jimmy. I think that was part of the verisimilitude of just honesty and reality that Carpenter has, and like I say, in all of his films, that's a very, very important component. So
Leopard, Hysteria. Come on, so many choices.
I think one of the only films that has one song that's not from John Carpenter is Halloween, when Laurie is driving right at the beginning, and she notices that she's being maybe followed. She's listening to "Don't Fear the Reaper" by Duelist.
Ah, nice.
And I
Yeah.
think,
Well
and it's
played.
very faint. It's not like in the background
Yeah.
where you can actually hear it as part of the soundtrack. It's on the radio, and you can barely notice it. But that's about it. But John's right. Like, I think John Carpenter wants to be so much in control of the storytelling that he knows the music is a part of it. You know, and
Fair enough.
It also saved money. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
clear the
There's a $4
license
million
those songs
budget, right?
would
Yeah.
be very expensive, and just doing your own soundtrack is pretty budget conscious. So,
well, and the thing, Ennio Morricone did the soundtrack.
Yeah,
So they
well,
spent money there.
and sometimes you're like, we gotta, you know. Well, The Thing is a lot better looking movie than They Live.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I mean, you know, it looks incredible. I mean, the special effects and everything. But you know, I was gonna say, I think Ricky and I both know Sandy King Carpenter.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. So, and I mean,
Nicky.
when you say John Carpenter actually, you know, read this in a comic, I mean, he's a big comics reader, big comics fan, obviously. You know, I think EC Comics had a huge influence on him, as they did on everybody. And then, you know, Sandy is, she's the associate producer on this film, and she's at Comic-Con, and, you know, she's great. She's, Ricky, you've met her, right?
Yeah, I've interviewed her.
Yeah. You interviewed her, for The Beat. Yeah, of course. And I mean, she's such a nice lady. Of course, I'm always like, want to be like, what about They Live? Tell me some stories about They Live.
Hell yeah.
Is she
when I talk
to her,
talk about it? Yeah.
Yeah, and well, I think she's like the brain trust, like the power behind the throne more than anything, because the way she talks about the movies, it's like, wait a minute, did you make this or was it John Carpenter? You stay home and he just gave you. But she's great, and she also, like, that same type of storytelling that John Carpenter is known for. She actually gets into the comics that she makes with Storm King. And to round it all out, I was going to say, and this might take a whole other program to talk about, but They Live is maybe John Carpenter's more comic booky movie. Like if you see Big Trouble in Little China is more of like the martial arts movies with westerns. Prince of Darkness is pure horror, like a classic Hammer horror stuff. But this one has like the cuts, the fights. It feels way more over the top. The colors of the aliens are very like the four colors of comic books. You know, I think.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I think maybe Sandy would be interesting to see if she had more voice in that decision, because it does look very much like something Sandy Carpenter would.
Well, we'll have to somehow quiz her about this at some point, you know, because it's too good not to.
Too much.
Yeah,
but I've got to get out of here in like.
Oh yeah, you gotta roll. All right, so Jimmy, you're recasting real fast.
Okay, real quick. So here I would see, since sticking in, I really like the idea, because I've done it in the past where I've sort of gender swap. I like the idea Ricky said, but I'm going to stick with what I have here. And maybe not a wrestler, but let's go with somebody who's a fighter. The Korean zombie, Jung Chen-sung, or Chen Sung-jung. He's number 4 in the UFC right now. Do you know him, the fighter?
Yeah.
So he's known as Korean zombie because he just keeps taking punches and somehow keeps going, you know. And he's like not a big guy, but he's physically very fit. He's here. I got a little picture I could show you of him. I could put in my background real quick if you guys have never seen Mr. Korean zombie himself there.
Oh, Jimmy getting with the sharing content. Yeah, nice.
Little Korean zombie, my man. And you know, he's probably never acted either, but you know, in Korea they do a lot of those variety shows, sports figures too. So he's certainly been around a lot of things like that. For Frank, I want to go with O'Shea Jackson Jr. Now we know he was he's Ice Cube's son. He played Ice Cube, and you know, Straight Outta Compton. He was in the recent movie with oh god, I just forgot the name of it. Get Mercy. He was in, so he's getting some credits in there. I think that'd be a good little matchup.
Godzilla, King of Monsters.
Yes, of course. He's in that, so I think that'd be a good matchup, because he's also not a huge guy either. So like the two of them would be a good match, I think. Scaling it down from the
You know who would be good? For once I actually have a casting choice, because I never do. You know who would be good is that Winston Duke.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Winston Duke from Black Panther, and many other things for sure.
That's true.
For our leading lady, Holly Thompson, who's the only character I think given her last name in the movie. This is going to be a little obscure, but I'll give you a little picture of her here. You can't really see it. I have to rotate it. Crap. Why can't you cross?
You share. Just share content. Can you share?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
so
there we go. Woo.
She's a Choi Soo-young. Now, she's an actress in Korea, but she was first known to be a member of the very popular girl group Girls' Generation, which was very huge in 2007 for about 10 years. Then she, like many K-pop stars, drifted into acting, and she's one of the top, like she's winning a lot of actress awards right now. But she also has these great eyes that sort of draw you in, kind of like Meg Foster had those really piercing eyes. She has a great look where you're kind of just drawn in by her, and you feel like, okay, I kind of want to follow her, but I kind of not sure if I trust her type thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I think she'd be great. And then for our street preacher, our blind street preacher, let's bring back Keenan Ivory Wayans. Like, what's he been doing? Come on.
That's like
he could play crazy great. Come on.
No, I want Mahershala Ali for that one.
Oh wow!
Even if it's just like a few minutes, I would.
I'm trying to do like a Tarantino where I bring back the old actors. You know,
Yeah.
Ali's doing fine. Keenan might need some work. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he's doing fine. But and then for the Drifter Collaborator, as we know, originally played by George Buckflower. Now, recently, I feel like I should keep this character of the white persuasion because, you know, you're that guy. And I was so impressed by him. I just hadn't seen him in anything recently until I saw Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. Nathan Lane was fantastic in that. I think Nathan Lane would be great because he has that quality of charming, but also can be very schmarmy and like, you know, which I think with the transition from Drifter to like the sellout, he'd be perfect, you know, and like, yeah whatever, guys, I'm a sellout. Look at me. Why not? You know, and he'd be great. And then finally, I'd say director-wise, I would go with Karen Kusama, who first came to fame. She directed Girl Fight, which shot Michelle Rodriguez to fame. So she's used to choreographing like a fight scene and all this other stuff or dealing with fights. She also did Jennifer's Body, which is a great little sort of sci-fi weird. I like that film. I know a lot of people.
Yeah, I like it.
So it has elements of that sci-fi to it. So she has the experience and she's a good director. So there you go. That's my dream recast and remake.
Nice.
Very cool.
But any other changes you guys see in there?
Well, I won't be alive to see the movie they make 50 years from now about this time, you know, the masterpiece that encapsulates the COVID era, because I think until we're well past this time, I don't think we could even approach these themes because they're just too much a fabric of our everyday life.
Yeah.
For sure.
For Nada, I would choose The Man. What's her name?
Becky Lynch.
Yeah, Becky Lynch.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
she'd be beyond perfect for it. Yeah.
I just hope that if they do it, they don't try to go too further down the honoring Roddy Piper and choose Ronda Rousey. I don't see her.
Well, I don't know. She was supposed to do a remake of Roadhouse. I don't know if it ever worked out.
Yeah. All right. What about Gina Rodriguez?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
The one I'm still thinking about is the Keith character, like the character Keith plays, and that one I'm still not sure. It would be interesting if both of them were women, though. You know.
Well, then you could have what's the name? She just started in how can I not remember her name? She's so amazing. She just started on Raw. With the long hair.
Bianca Belair.
Bianca Belair. Yeah, Bianca Belair. Yeah.
She's pretty great. Yeah.
So all right. Well, I know Jimmy's got to go.
Yeah,
so,
you guys can keep talking if you want.
He just learned how to do backgrounds, and it's really incredible.
I always know how to do backgrounds. I just hate them because you disappear into them, and literally I disappear myself.
Yeah. Otherwise, look how good John looks. John looks amazing. Okay,
because John is a good-looking guy. He's an actor.
Also well lit. I mean, that's the thing. Look, I'm not going to lie. I have an influencer light. Okay, I use an influencer light when I do these. You know, I got my cat. I got everything. I got my whole thing. So,
I've got the light in the back.
My iPhone.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, I think this is good, gentlemen. Thank you so much for an incredible conversation.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. We'll see what we see. Be careful out there. keep your friends. And so, so everybody say where we can find you on the internet.
You can find me at Ricky87PR on Twitter. Anywhere really. Like if you type my whole name, which is on Facebook, there's no one else named like me, I think. And I also wanted to point out really quick that when I put my glasses on, Zoom stayed the same. So I think they're not even trying.
Yeah, they're not.
You can find me on the internet at JONHOCHE on all social media.
And you can find me at Comics Ace, COMIXAC on all comics media, and also on The Beat at comicsbeat.com.
And I'm everywhere, Comic News Insider, comicnewsinsider.com, weekly show covering comics, TV, film, pop culture, reviews. Because I can't have anybody co-host, I get a lot of audio reviewers, and John is one of my regular ones as well. Thank you for that. You can just find me at Jimmy Aquino, JIMMYAQUINO, on the social medias.
All right. Until next time, we are Comic Beat Insider.